The House of Lords last week voted 185 to 148 in favour of full-term DIY abortions. That is, DIY abortions up to birth. That means mothers are now free to kill their full-term babies any method they wish, for any reason or no reason, and then dispose of those bodies, again, any way they wish. No legal consequences. And we should be shocked. Church, we should be shocked. We must never get desensitized to the horrors of this genocide of babies purely by merit of the fact that it keeps on going on and getting worse and worse because of familiarity. We should be shocked. And there's a very real sense in which God himself is shocked. He says in Jeremiah 7 and elsewhere, "It never even entered into my mind that you would do this." Speaking of child sacrifice. We should be shocked. But why are we surprised? Church, why are we surprised? We are getting what we have asked for. We put our request into the nation and we're getting back what we requested. We are reaping what we've sown. So why are we surprised? In 1965, the Church of England's Board for Social Responsibility published a report, Abortion, an Ethical Discussion. The Abortion Law Reform Association had been hard at work already for decades, and now the debate was brewing in Parliament. And this was the established church's contribution to that national conversation. Now there's a reason I'm starting right back here in 1965, so bear with me. Instead of providing the much needed clarity on the moral status of the unborn child, instead of providing that clarity, instead of providing a clear lead on the immorality of intentionally killing him or her, this report, which is very scant really on scripture, instead asked whether the life of the fetus should be sacrificed, this is the actual wording they used, whether it should be sacrificed in the interests of the mother. And ultimately, this document concluded that in many cases it could be, even for social reasons. The church report concluded, believe it or not, with its own draft bill, its own abortion bill. And it says it may be cited as the Abortion Act 1965. And in it, provision is made for abortion for reasons as broad and as vague as mental well-being of the mother. And it says that account may be taken of her total environment, actual or reasonably foreseeable. Okay, that means abortion on the grounds of circumstances and even possible circumstances, things that may happen in the future. Those, according to the Church of England in 1965, those are justifiable grounds for child sacrifice. I mean, this document is the Church of England's political manifesto on abortion in the 1960s. And so child sacrifice officially had, back then, the state church's blessing. Now, this is the document that helped, in his own words, helped David Steele, the Member of Parliament who brought the Private Members Bill that then became the Abortion Act 1967, which we're still under, this recent vote notwithstanding. David Steele said this some years ago: "I still maintain to this day, it, as in this, is the best argued document from a Christian standpoint in favour of having a positive law on abortion. And it counteracted," he says, "better than I could the arguments of the Roman Catholic Church. I had no difficulty reconciling my Christianity with abortion law reform." And so we need to see this. The Abortion Act of 1967 had the church's fingerprints all over it. And it wasn't a Church of England problem only, lest the rest of us rest on our laurels. There was a general silence from evangelicals at the time. And actually, it got even worse when that silence was broken by Rex Gardner, an evangelical, so he professed, whose book called Abortion, the Personal Dilemma in 1972 was about as bad as this document. he also argued in favour of child sacrifice. He claimed that life only really begins at birth. Biblically, he tried to argue that. His book is an absolute mess, and yet for years it was the go-to evangelical resource on abortion. Now, the church's witness in Great Britain did get clearer and stronger from the end of the 1970s onwards, largely thanks to Francis Schaeffer, but widespread, long-lasting conviction never really took hold of the soul of the British church. Nor, crucially, did it ever really manage to take root in the pulpits. And so Christians of my generation, for example, grew up in really a silence, a vacuum on this issue. We didn't think about it growing up. We didn't hear about it growing up. It just wasn't on the radar of the church. And so, of course, because of that, we evangelicals have never really, in a concerted or consistent, lasting way, been at work on the culture, been those voices for the voiceless, educating, persuading, advocating. Roman Catholics, yes, they have been pretty consistent, actually. But evangelicals, no. Schaeffer's harrowing quote still stands today. He said this: "Every abortion clinic should have a sign in front of it saying, 'Open by permission of the church.'" Isn't that true? Fast forward then to March the 18th, 2026, and the state of the baby genocide in our nation, surprise, surprise, has gone from bad to worse. The death toll now stands at 11 million or so babies. 1 in 3 babies are now being killed in the womb. And yet it would seem that our sin has not yet reached its full measure for we're to be handed over to up to birth DIY abortions, approved last week by the upper house. This, we need to understand this, is the fruit of decades of support for child sacrifice and then tacit approval, acquiescence, toleration by the church. This is the fruit of our witness. But let's look at the moment in time, last week when the vote came. As I say, it's not about that, it's about decades, but how did the established church fare at that moment? Did the bishops speak out? Well, we can thank God that on this occasion, 10 Church of England bishops did in the end vote against it. But the fact there was even a question mark over that, over whether they would, shows how far we have fallen. Sarah Mullally's speech was somewhat muddled and confused, in Damien Thompson's words, lackluster, suggesting that abortion up to birth involves moral complexity, and repeating the Church of England's vague statement of principled opposition, this is the quote, recognising that there can be limited conditions under which abortion may be preferable to any available alternatives. Now, these limited conditions have never been defined, and so really it's a fudge. But at least she voted the right way. But it's too little, and it's too late. And significantly, where were the other bishops? Fewer than half of the Lord's spiritual turned up to one of the most important moral votes of a lifetime. The main vote was very narrow. What difference might it have made had all the bishops been there and voted the right way and even spoken up in opposition? It's surely not too much to ask of a bishop that he'll be able to articulate the case for life persuasively and argue against the killing of unborn children. But most of them, more than half, were nowhere to be seen. It's shocking. Now, I started way back in 1965 because I think it's important to see that last week's vote, appalling though it is, shocking though it is not actually surprising. It did not appear in a vacuum, but rather what happened last week is simply the latest result of a long process. It's the moral tide of our nation going farther and farther out, in large part thanks to the church. We need to understand our part in all of this if we're to understand this situation appropriately. We need to see the connection between the church's witness, or lack thereof, and the state of the nation. We are reaping what we have sown. We're getting what we asked for. Now, we can and we should lament and grieve for the babies that will be butchered with impunity as a result of this awful ruling. We can and we should lament and grieve for our nation, governed by such wicked fools. We can and we should lament and grieve for the mothers, the fathers, the families, the siblings, the generations to come that will be devastated by yet more state-sanctioned shedding of innocent blood. But friends, if we look upon this scene and fail to perceive in it a reflection of ourselves, then we are missing the point. To a great extent, the nation is a reflection of the church within it. We have dressed the wound of this people lightly. We have said peace, peace, where there is no peace. We have not been voices for the voiceless. We've been asleep at the wheel. We've been watchmen on the walls, dozing. You'll have to forgive me, is this unfair? It seems to me there's a certain kind of Christian, even a certain kind of Christian leader who is a oncer, or maybe a twicer. That is to say, you only really hear them mentioning abortion once a year, maybe twice. Once when the new stats come out, showing how the baby genocide has gotten even worse. And then maybe once more each year when the laws of our nation get even worse. Some of them will mention these things only in private conversations. Some of them might mention it in a blog or an article. Few of them will mention it even once or twice on a Sunday in the gathering of the saints. Do these oncers and these twicers not realize, do they not see the connection between the nation's headlong dive into moral depravity that they bemoan once a year and the fact that they mention it only once a year? What do we expect? When we largely ignore this baby genocide and only maybe mention it once or twice a year to mark how much worse it's got, what do we expect? Are we surprised? Are we not reaping what we're sowing? I came across an article, this is a Babylon Bee article. After 12 years of quarterly church attendance, parents shocked by daughter's lack of faith. That one hurt. It's sharp, isn't it? And of course, we can't say that someone walking away from the faith is necessarily a reflection of their parenting. It might be their parents did it all right and it's still about grace and it's still about the decision of the individual. But if parents only model quarterly church attendance, should they be surprised if their children then don't take church attendance seriously? There is a principle, a biblical principle of reaping and sowing. So what's the plan, folks? Are we just going to keep on mentioning abortion once a year, max? Just to mark the ever-increasing degradation of our nation, the ever-worsening baby genocide, at most to mark the death toll once or twice a year? Is that our plan? Is that the plan for next year? Let's just mark again how many more babies have died? Or are we going to start teaching, praying, moving, acting like we actually mean it? Right now, we are reaping what we and our forebears have been sowing. I mean, when you've got the leading and largest, or one of them, evangelical conventions, actually opposing the public display of a living baby image and saying they are saddened, not by the genocide, but by the baby image being shown, are we surprised that these are the results we're getting? And then we complain and bemoan what's happened and we can't believe how evil the nation is getting. This is what we've asked for. This is right on cue. We've got the policies we've asked for. We've got the people we've asked for. Quite literally. These are the parliamentarians we voted in. According to an Evangelical Alliance survey, evangelicals voted for Labour more than the average person. Okay? Labour had abortion up till birth, decriminalisation on its manifesto back in 2019. Now, I don't think it was on the manifesto this time, but it's clear that that's what they were plotting. Key members within the Labour Party pushing assisted suicide, pushing abortion up till birth. And evangelicals voted in droves for the Labour Party. And so here it is. Here's what we asked for. Are we happy now? Is our multicultural live and let live approach to public life working out for us? The embracing of the secular dream, keep religion out of politics and it will be fine? Choose a football team approach to politics. Oh, you can vote for this party, I'll vote for that party, and it's all the same. God doesn't know what he thinks about these things. It's just up to us to decide. Even if your party supports assisted suicide and child sacrifice up to birth. See, what we sow is what we get. We build with poor materials, or we build on the wrong foundations, and then, well, let's see how it goes when the floods come, when the fire comes. Unless and until we understand that what happened last week was in large part the expected result of what we, the church, have been doing and saying, or not doing and saying. Unless and until we face that. It's much less to do with what the pro-life movement may have tried to achieve just over the last few months, scrambling around and lobbying Parliament. Unless we see the big picture about the church's witness and the fruit of that, we are not going to understand correctly the cause and effect in the moment we're in, and we're going to keep doing probably the same thing we've always been doing, and guess what? We'll get the same results. Now, the next video I'm going to do, God willing, is going to be focusing more on the what next. Okay, what do we do? But for now, can I just ask us to face facts and see what's happened here? And can I ask, why are we surprised? We shouldn't be surprised. This is the sowing and reaping principle working out. We are getting what we've asked for. We need to confess. We need to lament our own part to play, not just the wickedness of the nation. We need to confess, we need to lament, we need to repent, and we need to start taking meaningful action to be those voices for the voiceless that we are commanded to be. So look out for the next video. I'm hoping to put that out over the next day or two, but please, let's see what's happened. Let's face our own reflection in the mirror here. We are seeing the results of what we have been sowing.